FEMA.gov or crsresources.org. And of course, drainage system maintenance we're talking about today, but we've got 90 some different elements that we can potentially score. And these are listed in these two, actually it's one spreadsheet on our website and more resources there. And Heidi, I apologize, but on my screen, I can't, it's not large enough to see any of the text.
Oh, it looks okay on my screen. I can see.
I know it's, yeah. So is there a way for me to change how I'm sharing?
Yeah, it must be your screen setup. So let me just look here.
I was able to go in and just put your presentation on full screen on mine and I can read it fine.
Yeah, can you go to the three dots on your toolbar there and say enter full screen? Does that work?
Yeah, that helps a lot.
Okay.
Except now every time somebody comes in,
It's gonna ding.
But nobody's missed anything really important yet. So anyway, on the website, we have specialists by state. I think Cara Redente is still doing all of Colorado. Some of our technical specialists, all our contact information, should you need to get a hold of us for anything. So I'd like to go through the goals of the CRS program: reduce and avoid flood damage to insurable property, strengthen and support the insurance aspects of the National Flood Insurance Program, because we are a part of the National Flood Insurance Program, a subset of them, and further foster comprehensive floodplain management. So not just insurable buildings, other things like natural functions, emergency services can also earn credit. So today's topic, drainage system maintenance, has gone through some significant changes in the last 10 years. But the overview is still activity credits drainage system maintenance programs that keep stream channels and storage basins clear of debris so that their flood carrying and storage capacity are maintained. We now have 5 elements here: channel debris removal, 200 points, problem site maintenance up to 50, CIP up to 70 points, stream dumping regulations up to 30, and then storage basin maintenance, which was added in 2013, up to 120 points. The drainage system we're talking about for CRS purposes is the natural streams and channels, man-made water courses, conduits, and storage basins. The natural conveyance system, which is what we're looking to credit in this activity, maintenance of those systems, open channels that must be maintained to prevent damage to buildings or infrastructure from smaller, more frequent storms. So we're generally only concerned with developed areas. You get outside the cities, out into the rural areas of the counties, those systems we're generally not concerned about in this activity. You don't have to include those in your program, but you do need to include any repetitive loss areas in the program. Storage basins are all constructed stormwater runoff detention or retention facilities located on public and private property. Size does not matter to us. We've got some small ones in some parts of the country under Walmart parking lots, and then we've got some very, very large publicly owned ones, hundreds of acre feet of storage. So these are all credited under storage basin maintenance. Excuse me. So the conveyance system maintenance program is channel debris removal primarily, problem site maintenance, and this is anywhere in your drainage system, and then stream dumping regulations. Storage basin maintenance program is for the storage basins. For both conveyance and storage, for improving and fixing any problems within your drainage system, we credit that as capital improvement program. A key to all the programs is that you must inspect at least annually. and that is a port. You must, whatever is credited, you must inspect annually. So if you have a system and you inspect 1/3 of it each year, that's not annually. It would have to be the same 1/3 each year. Identify problems, and if there are problems, take corrective actions. Inspections need to be done annually, as I said, post-storm and after a complaint. We do have an impact adjustment so that if you don't inspect all of your system annually, because it's just too big, you can't get to it, but there are parts that you do annually, there's an impact adjustment for partial credit. We don't care who actually does the inspection maintenance, but you as the community are required to provide the documentation to us. You must have a secure funding source for your activities. Must comply with EHB, Environmental Historic Preservation criteria, in other words, provide a certification you're complying with all applicable laws in your program. And if there are any permit restrictions, something we deal with a lot here in the Pacific Northwest, for those of you who don't know, I live in Seattle, is endangered species. We can't just go into a channel and take debris out anytime, any way we want. We have to meet the permit conditions of Fish and Wildlife Service, which limits us to particular times of the year. And a lot of what is called debris in parts of the country is called habitat here, so we can't remove it. That is fine as long as you're complying with the permit restrictions. We're not going to second guess the agencies. So for channel debris removal, you must meet all applicable credit criteria. Inspections, as I said, annually after complaint, after storms, and take action when it's found. You must have written procedures. And it's the standard operating procedures is really what we look at first to determine if you meet the criteria in number 2 up above. You must have a map of the natural conveyance system and an inventory of that system. We don't care if it's a GIS map, a USGS quad map, however you create that map of your system and however you create the inventory of your system. What we do want is that the map and the inventory and your inspection records all correlate. So that if we asked for an inspection record of a certain portion of your system, you can find it. So the written procedures need to tell us who's responsible, how you do your inspections, what are your procedures for removal, and what are the records that are kept. Typically, we also see how often and when inspections are done and who's reported to. So as I said, debris removal, trash, almost everywhere, shopping carts, trash, garbage can be removed at almost any time. Logs, that kind of stuff depends on where you're at. Anything that can constrict flow or in a storage basin, reduce the storage capacity, for instance. As I alluded to earlier, storage or debris removal procedures vary by the type of channel it is. So if you've got a completely natural channel, you may have different procedures than if you've gone in and channelized that stream, for instance, made it into more of a canal. You may have different procedures for those types of facilities. Here you can kind of see stream's been left natural, probably not a lot to be done there versus a channelized stream. This has a lot that should be done to it and probably hasn't been done, if you can see the picture. Same thing here, procedure's different. Wouldn't necessarily take out the logs, but you do have repairs that are needed here in order to maintain the capacity. Excuse me. And again, written procedures, who's responsible, inspections, how do you remove it, and what kind of records are kept. documentation of the area that's inspected annually, even when no problems are found. We've had this occur in several communities. They say, sure, we go out every year, 2 year, every couple months actually inspect everything. And we ask them, well, where's your records of that? They say, well, we only write stuff down when we find a problem. We say, well, that's not good enough for us for verification. And I would think for city council, it's not good enough either. They want to know what you're spending your time on. Anyway, yeah, if inspections, even when no problems are found, just you've gone out there, Boulder Creek, for instance, no problems, write it down, however your system takes it. And then the records that maintenance was performed when inspections revealed problems. So typically what we're looking for is the date of the inspection, who did it, was it an annual post-storm inspection or complaint driven? What was observed? And this could be no problems at all. Follow-up maintenance action required, yes or no? And if so, was it done? So those are the types of records we're looking for in order to credit your program. Map. Identify the developed area of the community, because that's really what we're talking about. If your program extends to rural areas and it's all in a GIS system, for instance, there's no requirement to eliminate those areas, but you can if you want to, if you think it gets you a better score. But if it's easier not to, you can include everything. So you can exclude undeveloped areas, areas of no buildings, areas of 5-acre lots can be eliminated. Some of you may have areas where the channel is very incised. So even though you don't do maintenance, you get a lot of debris in there, it's just not going to impact anybody. Those areas can also be eliminated. Show all public and private areas. This is another common misconception. This is for the entire drainage system, whether or not you own it. It could be partially in your ownership, partially private, partially the state. If you're the city, it could be partially the county or a drainage district. So it's the entire system within your community, public and private. In particular, all channels in the SFHA. So include all blue lines on quad maps and all channels draining more than 40 acres, including pipes and underground segments that replaced an open channel. Because those can be credited, even though we're crediting the natural system. If you have replaced a portion of the natural system with canal, pipe, culvert, anything like that, that is part of your system, and we should be crediting you for your work there. I like to tell people, one of my first jobs out of college was in engineering in a small community in Eastern Washington, and part of my duties was walking through a mile of box culvert every year to make sure it was still open, because we'd put a stream underground and then put a state highway on top of it. So that was kind of the fun start to each year. So map that conveyance system. When we started in 2013, we wanted segments, a segment between each bridge, that kind of thing. We no longer care about that because we're going to credit you based on the percent of the system that you are inspecting and maintaining. But you can still do the component method that we have in the manual. Otherwise, you could just say this is 3 different streams, for instance, or 4. However you want to do it, however it's in your system, we'll work with you. Not a problem. It's a different way of mapping the system. Data labels. Label the system. If you've got it by structure, label those. Channel segments, as I said, they can be any length. Could be if you inspect 4 or 5 miles in one day, and that's what you typically do, that could be a segment. And then we'll give you credit for that entire length of that segment. Show the underground connections on the map and label. And when we say label each segment, I should have changed this language because really what we're talking about is give it a name and correlate it with your inventory. So however you do your inspections, however your inventory is set up, make sure they correlate. So again, this is the label. This is the old way we thought about doing it. You've got your culverts, bridges, channel segments. We've gone back to you determine what they are. We don't care how you create this inventory or system, just that it's complete, just that it correlates with your map, and just that it correlates with your inspection records. Some of those of you who live in large communities, you already have everything on a GIS system. It's labeled. Your maintenance crews know exactly where to go, what to do. Great. Work with them. And don't create something special for us. It's just a sample we have where it says component. That's just the name of whatever it is. What are we talking about? Channel, something else, storage basin, short description, who owns it, who's responsible for it, and show which parts are covered by the inventory, because frequently privately owned facilities or streams on private property, communities can't get to inspect and or maintain. They're privately controlled. So you won't be able to get credit for that, but they are part of your system. Problem site maintenance, we also need a map showing where your problem sites are. Then in the list of your problem sites, we need to know why it's a problem site. Credit points, it's how much of your system do you inspect annually and maintain when needed versus the total length of your system. So we moved to think, actually we went back to what we were doing in 2007 versus the total length of the system. But we are now focusing on the natural system. And again, having a table somewhat like this, or being able to export to an Excel spreadsheet showing which segments are credited, which segments are not, if it's a problem site, and then a length for each segment in your inventory, or each piece of your inventory. Heidi, we'll keep questions till later. Is that right? Okay. Anyway, so impact adjustment is just, as we see here, how many components or total length of channel, just how much of it can be credited. Most of it can be, but this one isn't. If we went back to doing it by components, we'd have 5/6 for 83% of the total credit. So that'd be 166 points. If you're in a situation where you really don't expect anything or very much annually, we can still give credit to you if you at least 10% of the credit, 20 points, if you do some portion of your system annually, you inspect annually, and you have a standard operating procedures. And this could be just, hey, we're inspecting our problem sites multiple times a year. You should be able to get credit for that as both CDR and problem sites, if those problem sites are on your natural channel system. Set the verification visit or prior to the verification visit. We're trying to get all this documentation ahead of time so that at the verification visit, we can actually go over any issues we find in the verification, give you an idea of what the scoring might be. But what are your procedures? Standard operating procedures. What's the map of your system? Do you have an inventory of your system? And a lot of times we'll need a map of the entire system or a map folio in some cases. but we don't necessarily need the entire inventory. This is something to work with your specialist on, because if it's GIS based, we can get a sample of your inventory and not have the whole thing printed out, for instance. That just becomes too cumbersome for both of us and a lot of work. Records of inspections and maintenance, your specialist should be asking you for a random sample of 30 sites in your system for those records. Hopefully you can find those. Every cycle visit, we want a copy of the Environmental Historic Preservation Community Certification and a recertification, examples of records from previous years. So our EHP certification is just if you considered all state and local permits, endangered species, and any applicable Section 404 permit requirements. So moving on, problem site maintenance. Credit for CDR is not required to obtain credit for problem sites. Problem sites, as I said, could be anywhere in your drainage system. It could be undersized drainage inlets, for instance. Or it could be replacing 5-year pipes with 10-year pipes. It's anywhere, any sort of problems you've identified. We do need a map, and we do need your procedures, and we need to know why it's different. And we do expect that inspections will be more than once a year. Again, after all major storms, take action when needed. Commonly, at least here in Western Washington and Eastern Washington, where we see a lot of problem sites or culverts, they're just not big enough or they get clogged with debris. It could be natural debris, it could be man-made debris, but they just clog up all the time after storms. So we need to keep going out there and cleaning them. So again, same sort of documentation as CDR. Your SOP needs to show why it's different. What are your procedures for inspection? Who's responsible? Keep records, because we'll be asking for copies of the records. There is no impact adjustment. So this is 50 points. Again, the documentation, your SOP, list of sites, map of problem sites, records of inspection, and then recertification, some records. Moving on to CIP, it's an ongoing program to make permanent improvements, not a program for maintenance or one-time projects. It must have a continuous source of funding and not be, you can't rely 100% on outside funding for your CIP. You have to have a source of local money, usually general fund or stormwater utility or flood control district money going into your CIP. We encourage communities to augment whatever that source is with grants whenever available, outside sources of money whenever available. It's just, you shouldn't be relying on those sources. Credible examples are enlarging culvert bridge openings, enlarging storage basins or creating new ones, installing debris gates, pretty much whatever you think of that can improve your system. You must meet the activity credit criteria, which again is you must have a problem site CIP credit. Sites must be part of the conveyance system master list of projects and a list showing annual expenditures. Small communities may not be making annual expenditures, but they show a consistent pattern over the years of saving up to do a project here and there and getting those projects off their list. And actually, number 3 should be sites must be part of their conveyance or storage basin maintenance system. So if you've got a large detention facility and it needs to be upgraded, for instance, that could be counted as part of your CIP. Just for the creation of a CIP, that's 30 points. We don't care how you did it. But if, like a lot of communities here in the Puget Sound, I believe the Front Range of Colorado, if you've done a watershed-based engineering analysis of your drainage system, and you've included that 1% annual storm event in that analysis, and then come up with a list of problem sites, frequently flooded areas, and a list of projects you could undertake to improve things, that can increase your score another 40 points. Because we think if you've gone to that level of effort, you've got a much better idea of what's actually required to meet your required level of service for drainage. There's no impact adjustment for the 30 points, but there is an impact adjustment for the additional 40 points. And basically that's based upon the area of the community that is covered by that watershed analysis. Many years ago, I did watershed planning for a small community in Western Washington, and their budget was such that we did one watershed a year, and it took us 5 years, 5 watersheds to get the entire community. So that's why we have this credit. If you've only been able to do part of watershed, that's great. We'll give you some credit, but when you get the entire community done, you get the entire credit. Documentation. What is your CIP? You list of projects, sites needing work, recommendations for the sites. These can be fairly general, like increased capacity could be the recommendation. You don't have to say, well, we need a 48-inch pipe instead of a 24-inch pipe. That's great if you can, but not required. You must be able to show that funds are spent every year, or that you have a continuous pattern of spending funds as you have the ability to spend them. Stream dumping regulations. You must have CDR credit for this. Regulations must be enforced throughout the community. You must have a responsible office. You must have enforcement procedures. One issue we've seen with this frequently is a lot of MPDS communities, MS4 permit communities, just hand over their illicit discharge regulations. Those are not adequate unless illicit discharge includes trash, for instance. You must have modified the standard EPA language to include trash in order for it to be credited. Because that's what we're really looking for. It's not water quality, but quantity of the water, conveyance capacity. Get additional credit with publicity, notice sent to property owners, these no dumping signs along the stream, for instance, at culverts and bridges, or if you have an outreach project specified in a program for public information, you can get up to 30 points here. So 15 just for having the regulations, 25 is publicized, and 30 with the PPI. And the documentation is basically the regulations and the publicity. And certification, we do this again. We want the publicity. Storage basin maintenance. This is for all constructed stormwater runoff detention or retention basins facilities located on public or private property, including all those that you've required developers to construct as part of their drainage permit, for instance, when they come in for a land use permit. And again, what we do, we credit this because it's not properly maintained, people throw stuff in it. If they can erode, they can fill up a sediment, they lose their storage capacity. So we want you to take a look at them manually and make sure they're functioning as designed, because otherwise, if you're not functioning as designed, my opinion is why bother, basically. In order to get credit for storage basin maintenance, you must get credit for PUB within activity 450 for stormwater management regulations. PUB is the credit you get for having the legal authority to force a private property owner to do the maintenance if they are not taking care of it. So it gives you the authority to inspect and you the authority to either force them to do the maintenance or for you to do it on their property. So these inspections need to be at least annually upon complaint after big storms. And again, all this work can be done by somebody else. Communities in Florida require each large development has an HOA. They have to hire an engineer every year and go out and inspect all their facilities and send a report to the community. That's great. That's the kind of thing we're looking for. So again, written procedures, identical to your CDR procedures, same types of things are required. In fact, a lot of communities combine them because they have the same crews doing both. So your facilities inspection for storage basins, it's all in one place. Map of all the basins, inventory of the basins, keep records of the inspections and the maintenance. Again, the procedures, who's responsible? How is it inspected? How is it maintained? And how are the records kept? What kind of records are kept? We map everything, we inventory the basins, and then we keep the records. So we can verify to the specialist that yes, we're actually doing all this work. So credit is based upon the number of storage basins you inspect, maintain as needed annually versus all the storage basins in your community. So that very, very large 100-acre detention facility that you own gets exactly the same amount of credit as that 800 cubic foot detention facility you've required a developer to maintain. And one of the reasons is if it's a big, large public facility, we're pretty sure you're going to take care of it. Whereas that small private facility, we have a lot less confidence the owner is going to take care of it. And we sure hope you are doing something to ensure that he is. So the documentation is pretty much identical to CDR procedures, map, inventory records, and AHP certification. Same kind of stuff. For both CDR, SPM, office review of map and inventory procedures before we do much anything else, sample inspection and maintenance records, EHP and other items as required by the specialist. So in summary, we've got 5 different creditable activities here. CDR, problem side maintenance, capital improvement program, stream dumping regulations, storage basin maintenance. And the key here is you have to have written procedures, have to have annual inspections, and you have to have a map of the facilities and inventory of the facilities and records of inspections that correlate together so that if we look at a place on a map, we ask for the inspection records of that place, you know where it is because it's got a name that correlates with the record, how your inspection records are kept. So you can find it for us. Okay, Heidi, any questions? And I'm going to stop sharing.
Yeah, does anybody have any questions for Dave?
Or is everybody asleep?
Dave, I came up with a question. This is Jim Kaiser from City of Thornton. When you mentioned, the entire system, including private systems, when we're inside, commercial sites, for example, they've got a system. We frequently have mapped that in our GIS, but it's kind of the top of the basin scenario. For example,
Yes.
we just put in commuter railroad and in the station sites, we've got from their record drawings, we've mapped all of their system, but you also mentioned the 40-acre criterion. So if it is collecting just from their site and then feeding that into the public system, that is either going through their site because it came off an adjoining street, or, you know, it's immediately outside their site in a public right of way. Is that still part of the private system we have to look at?
No, let me back up in that if you're talking channel debris removal, we want a map of the entire, what we call the natural system. So that, I mean, that's what we're really looking at to try to credit. And I apologize, I can't get rid of my presentation. I haven't figured out how to do that yet. So the drainage system built to serve, thank you, Heidi, development in general is not anything we are interested in, especially for a conveyance system. So if you've got a 40-acre development or even a 160-acre development, and there's no stream on it, no existing streams on it, or a ravine, even a dry wash that would have carried water, we really don't care about the system that they build on that site to convey water. A 5-year design standard in the Denver urban area. Those types of things we're generally not concerned with unless it replaced a natural drainage, a natural swale, or something like that. So hopefully a lot of what you mentioned, you just wouldn't be concerned with. We just don't have to, even though it's in your GIS system, it's not part of the system that we're really interested in. Now, if they have 4 or 5 different small storage basins on site, then that is what we are concerned with for storage basin maintenance, but we'd only be concerned with those storage basins and not the pipes to and from them. Hopefully that helps.
Yes, very much so. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, we can open up to anything 540 or CRS related, I guess.
Yeah. Any other CRS questions?
Yeah, this is Doug Jardine, City of Fort Collins. I caught part of your presentation. I didn't get it all, but so we have these big natural areas that aren't necessarily developed, don't have buildings, but they do have, you know, ponds, detention areas, overflow for the river. Do we need to inspect all of those natural area ponds and channels?
They're detention for overflow from the river.
For the most part, I mean, they're retention ponds mostly. They do hold water year round, but if the excuse me, if the river does overflow, it is able to go into there and spread the flow.
No, we're not looking at those because those aren't there to what I call serve development and prevent development from causing damage on something downstream. No, that's not something we'd be interested in.
Okay, so that was my question. I mean, we do inspect them and see if there's any damages after flooding or whatever, but I just didn't know if that needed to be included in our annual inspection.
Not specifically, you know, Fort Collins, which river is it?
Pooter?
Yeah, that's getting to the size where even though it's part of your drainage system, the Poudre River, We're really not going to expect you to do much inspection or maintenance outside unless you get some debris jam on a bridge or something.
Okay, thank you.
This was a question. It's Audrey, City of Lakewood. This is for Doug. Doug, what about your concrete batch plant detention ponds? You know, the old existing batch plant ponds? Do you guys count those?
Doug, I think that question is for you.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was turning my phone off. Yeah, we do, because a lot of those are part of those natural areas as well. They are old mining, gravel mine pits. Is what
Right. Okay, so you are including those in your maintenance and whatnot?
we do include them in inspections just for the purpose of, making sure there is not erosion or there's damage caused by the public.
Okay.
I would have to look to see if we actually claim those for CRS, though. I think they're just part of our maintenance program. I don't think we claim them.
No,
That-
we
Yeah.
don't, lady. We've never done those. I just wanted to verify whether we needed to.
Yeah, I was just curious.
No, those gravel pits along the river, they're a great thing to inspect. Where I grew up in Eastern Washington along the Yakima River, there's several of them, and I know Yakima County goes in and looks at them all the time because they're afraid that the river's going to capture them and just change course and go someplace they really don't want.
Exactly, and that's what we have. We have a couple of levees protecting certain ones that we definitely inspect annually.
Well, there you go, potential for levy credit. Activity 620.
Any other questions for Dave? While we
Well,
have it.
Just a sidebar to those last comments. We've got in Thornton, we have quite a few gravel pits along the South Platte River that have been converted to water storage reservoirs. And I don't remember the exact catalyst, but back in the day, I believe it was Adams County that developed some spillway criteria, and the whole reason is to let the river in a controlled fashion so that it does not cut through the quote unquote levees, more appropriately, the unmined areas that may have had spoil piled on top of them between the river and the pit. And after the 2013 floods, where we almost lost a reservoir, we've gone back in and restored it and installed spillways. And they activate at about a 2-year event on the South Platte. So more often than we would like, because it brings dirty water from the upstream areas taking a bath into our water storage reservoirs, but those thousands of acre feet of storage that we've gained from those is too big of an asset to lose.
Yeah, that makes sense. And sorry to interrupt you there, but that's kind of what we've done with our levees. We've actually put spill structures to help control the flow out of the river into those old gravel pits. So we don't have as much damage because 2013 was a good example here with the Pooter as well. It went over into several of our natural areas and we had very minimal damage from the spill structures that had been installed.
Any questions on our addendum or anything else that has come up in the past year or two? Everybody's just all set for their cycle visit.
We're ready to go. Okay.
Well, Heidi, if anybody comes up with questions,
Oh, sorry,
Just
my internet might be.
information.
Oh, there we go. Okay. I was worried I lost you all for a second. Okay, well, thank you so much, Dave. And yeah, we'll let you know if there's any follow-up questions afterwards. And thanks for your time and your presentation today. And yeah, you can stay on if you want to. I'm just going to open the floor to any other CRS updates from anybody, or we don't really have an agenda today. And I'll let Marcia send out a maybe a Google Doodle poll or something to schedule the next meeting. But if anybody has something they want to talk about CRS wise today, happy to bring it up, and or any other updates.
Yeah, Heidi, I'll pass on the gist of the email conversation we had last week regarding the CRS training in Colorado. So that was something that we were looking to have in August. And when we were looking to have it in August of last year, Monica Bortolini with the City of Longmont was coordinating facilities, and since I live close by, I was going to help her with that. But obviously that got canceled. We tentatively were looking at again this August. So Marcia reached out to Amanda Goins at Verisk, and they are still restricted, and possibly in September. I don't see Monica on this call, so that's something that we may want to try and get set up in the fall, but as long as Verisk can't travel, and I would think for something like this, we'd want at least an 8 or 10 week lead time so people can coordinate with their calendars and make it. But that's what we know at this point. So it's still hoped for. It sounds like Verisk is still open to doing it, but we just don't have a date yet.
Was there talk about doing an online course in mid-August? 16th, 17th timeframe?
I don't remember seeing anything. Heidi, do you?
Not with the bigger group. Marcia and I kind of talked about whether they could offer it virtually. I don't know. That would be, having gone to the training, I feel like the in-person is just so much more valuable. I mean, it's kind of like this, you know, you end up with fewer questions, I feel like, and less interaction. So it would be really nice to do it in person if at all possible. And it sounds like we may be able to hear about options in September, hopefully next month. So that would be hopefully early enough for people to make plans, because I know we sent out a poll and we had a lot of interest in having that course again. So I think the current plan is to hope for in person and wait until next month and maybe fall back on virtual if we have to, sort of thing.
Yeah, because I think Amanda was reaching out to some of us about teaching potentially in August, and that would be the 2-day course online. And as much as I like those, I agree, Heidi, in person is much, much better. We are tentatively moving forward with a training in South Florida late November, I believe. But Jim, you're totally right. As of now, Verisk ISO folks can't travel overnight. They can't fly anywhere. So, and that's looking like September before they can.
Do you think you'll be able to plan for September? I mean, you'll have an answer, or will it be like in September suddenly it changes?
I think they will know before.
Okay.
We have a task force meeting in September. That is going to be virtual. It's going to be online. We know that already. That was decided a long time ago. But the way things are going, it would not surprise me that Ferris comes back in a month and a half and says, yeah, but in September, we will let people go. But I'm a consultant of Ferris, so I'm not part of the internal conversations.
Sure.
Yeah, and mid-September is CASPM, which is going to be virtual again this year, and if it follows the pattern of last year, I think it's 3 consecutive half days of conferences. So we'd probably want to space out from that probably into October. November you get dueling holidays at that point between the short week for Veterans Day and Thanksgiving, of course. So perhaps October might be a good time to start looking at.
Oh, and Stacy Thompson just posted in the chat that she saw at ASFPM, they said the 4-day EMI classes and field deploy classes will return in 2022. So maybe we won't get a field deploy class until 2022.
Well, of course, federal
we actually have-
2022 is October.
Yeah. This was their calendar year at EMI, and there is one scheduled for February at EMI, and then one for later in the year. Verisk, however, works on an annual budget, and I think we have budget for 1 or 2 in person, which we convert into the 2-day, and we can do like 3 or 4 2-days for 1 4-day in person. So yeah, well, 2022 is quite likely. Amanda is really the person, Jim. You're talking to the right person.
So we'll just keep everybody updated if we hear more from her on that. Anybody else have topics, comments? Okay, well, we're having a shorter virtual meeting this time. Can't wait until we can all do in person again and hang out and chat afterwards for a bit. But if there's nothing else, then I'll give you some of your time back today.
Thanks all.
Take care.
Thanks.